We've just come out of a bank holiday weekend with local and national elections ahead of us this Thursday. In other words, we've not only had much to discuss, but a lot of time to discuss it. Maybe a few beers as well in the May sunshine. A deluge of takes and analysis before what will likely be the most important round of elections outside a general election in recent decades. Part of that happened on LBC on Sunday, on a show hosted by Goodall. He spoke to a range of guests about the stories leading the news, including Labour's Secretary of State for Transport, Heidi Alexander.
Is he really saying that if you go on a march to protest entirely legitimately against what the Israeli government is doing in Lebanon and Gaza, and someone you don't know, who has nothing to do with you, says that at some point on a march, that you yourself are calling for terrorism against Jews?
I listened to that interview, and what he said was he thinks that everyone's got a responsibility to call it out. And knowing, as we do, what the Jewish community here, which is violence towards Jews, when people shout, globalise the Intifada, he was saying that actually it's on all of us. You know, if individuals go to a protest to express their concerns about what is happening in the Middle East, then actually, you know, individuals on that march, we've all got a responsibility to speak up.
Have you ever been on a protest where someone says something you don't agree with? I'm sure you have. But that didn't mean presumably you ought not to have gone on the protest.
I mean, the protests, that I went on, many decades ago now, were always quite good-spirited. I actually went on the protest against the war in Iraq at the time, and I don't remember that.
Given 1 million people went on the Iraq war march, someone may well have said globalise the Intifada. I don't think anyone would have legitimately turned around to you and said that you were legitimising Jew hate.
What we have seen is, repeated marches. We have given the police power now to look at where, how you deal with this cumulative impact. There is more protest that's happening in the country at the moment.
But if the Prime Minister believes that, he truly believes that, why doesn't he just ban them?
Banned marches?
Well, yes. If he believes that those
marches...
Well,
he's also said in that same interview that he gave this week, Lewis, that,
This was his statement that he made from Downing Street, is it?
Yeah, and, look, I listened to a long interview that he's given in the last couple of days where, he's actually talked about the fact that he has long defended the right to peaceful protest in this country, and that's not changing now.
Well, except that he's telling people who go on some of those protests that by standing next to people saying globalise the Intifada, they're calling for terrorism against Jews.
Well, look, no, we've dealt with that. I've given you...
Have we?
Yeah, because I've explained in the same sentence, he was just saying that if you're hearing that type of pretty extreme and intimidatory behaviour, perhaps we've all got a responsibility to call it out.
What does that even mean? If I go on a protest and I now see a placard 100 meters away, I'm wearing my glasses, I can see that far, and it says globalise Intifada, I have to run over there, I have to call them out, I have to wag my finger. What are you even talking about? The idea that 1 million people on a protest are somehow culpable for what maybe 100 people on that protest think, or 1,000 or 10,000 or one person. By the way, what's the this is so arbitrary. What's the line? If it's just one person, 1,000 people, at what point does it matter? None of this is remotely coherent intellectually. In that same conversation, Goodall quizzed Alexander.
What he said about the actions of those two brave Metropolitan Police officers was pretty disgusting. He's rightly apologised, but I do think someone that is so quick to jump to their phone to be retweeting that type of content is not really fit to be leading a political party in this country.
Well, so tweeting something stupid is disqualifying from leading a political party, but appointing a friend of one of the worst paedophiles of our age for one of the most prestigious diplomatic posts we have, that's not disqualifying.
Well, look, we've had weeks of discussion about Peter Mandelson, and the Prime Minister has said he made a mistake, and he's apologised for that. I've never seen, our Prime Minister, criticise the Metropolitan Police, who were doing an incredibly brave job. You've only got to look at that video and the footage of what was going on there.
He just appointed someone who was a friend of one of the worst paedophiles of our age, but that's not disqualifying. And actually, retweeting something stupid, that is disqualifying.
But based upon information where, he and his staff weren't given full information. He was effectively lied to about the nature of the relationship between Peter Mandelson and Jeffrey Epstein.
Well, you can certainly see why they don't want a leadership contest in the Labour Party if this is the calibre of their MPs. Look, people should be prudent about social media use. Absolutely. Particularly political leaders. They should set an example. But one retweet should disqualify someone from public office? Really? Well, if that was the case, nobody would be in politics. I'd have been banned dozens of times. Maybe these people think I shouldn't even be allowed on YouTube because of bad retweets. Who knows? And clearly, it isn't worse than appointing Peter Mandelson as ambassador to Washington. Grow up! Why do I feel like the entire political class make less sense than my daughter, who, by the way, is 2.5 years old? Their complacency, sense of entitlement, and incompetence has gelled into this manufacture of a completely parallel reality where one retweet means you can no longer be a legitimate actor on the national political stage.
I mean, again, the one retweet wasn't even... I disagreed with the retweet. I've been over this. Lots of people got angry at me in the comments. But he didn't retweet something racist. He didn't retweet a threat against anyone. He retweeted a video which was questioning some police kicking a guy in the head. Right now, I think, given the context, as a party leader, that was a bit of a mistake. It's not outrageous. It's fine. Right? This whole thing is bonkers. And I mean, the Heidi Alexander one in a way, because with Kemi Badenoch, when I watch that, it infuriates me because she's so clearly trying to, I suppose, whip up a frenzy, which is so irresponsible because it is going to sort of heighten anti-Semitism, it's going to heighten Islamophobia. It's just really bad for community relations in the UK for a completely single reason. Heidi Alexander, you watch that, she's not enjoying it. She doesn't believe a single thing she's saying.
You think?
Like, look at that. I mean, he's like, you've been on demonstrations that didn't know. She's like, oh, I haven't been on demonstrations for a while. Yeah, maybe that. I don't know. We've covered that, haven't we? Is that, have we? Is that, oh,
you're not the producer of the show.
No, let's just move. She seemed like she just didn't want to be there. I mean, because no one can really bother to defend Keir Starmer anymore now because they don't think he's going to be there for very long. So I think like she was just like, can we wrap this up soon, please? Because I know I'm not persuaded. I know I'm not convincing anyone with this interview. That was the impression I got watching that. Sad.
I don't know. I think they've spun so much nonsense. I do genuinely believe it's almost like a psychological condition now of much of the Labour Party establishment. They've just spun so many alternatives. They're constantly weaving a new reality. We knew 400 seats would vote Leave in a second referendum. They weave this new reality. No, there's an overwhelming appetite to vote Remain. Well, you want to stay in the EU, but these guys don't. And even if it's a majority of the country, then they're geographically concentrated in such a way that you'll lose in the general election. We saw it with Corbyn. They're constantly, Boris Johnson, agree or disagree, you should think maybe he should leave or shouldn't leave. COVID, of course, was a very important and unique political context. But they're constantly trying to manufacture outrages, you might say sometimes legitimately, but they're constantly trying to manufacture outrages. And it feels to me that the Labour right, their idea of politics is literally telling you what to feel, not what to think, not how to think, what to feel. You should feel outraged at this. Why? I don't know why. I just feel outraged. On that same show, Goodall also spoke to Conservative MP Helen Whately.
Well, your leader, in fact, has said that anti-Semitism cannot remain acceptable in supposedly polite dinner party conversations. What does she mean by that? What does she have in mind?
That's just one of the things that's been pulled out from an interview and an article that she's written on this, talking about the fact that it's almost become normalised, I guess, in the currency and somewhat under the guise of pro-Palestine and to some extent...
Have you been at dinner parties where people have been anti-Semitic?
No, I haven't. But what I have heard is people thinking that if they are kind of advocating for Palestine, then they're kind of somehow on the side of on the side of virtue. When actually, when you look at some of the protests that have taken place, which have been actually strongly anti-Israel, including people calling for the end of Israel and for Jewish people to be out of
But criticism of Israel and anti-Semitism are not the same thing, are they? And indeed, it's dangerous to elide them.
But what we're seeing is the two things actually being bundled together, and people not realising that if they are getting involved in that, they're becoming part of this whole movement against against Israel and against Jewish
You can go on a protest
people.
protesting Israeli government policy and not be anti-Semitic.
So I think there's the problem is that what we've seen happen with some of the protests is as they've become
There are Jews on these protests. They're not anti-Semitic.
Some of them have become breeding grounds for anti-Semitism and extremism. And this has to be called out. It is not okay. They're not just peaceful protests. They are truly hate marches.
Again, it's a political line, right? They are hate marches. They're telling you what to feel. Hate, strong word. They're telling you what to feel. Not what to think. This is my argument. This is my policy. How you should feel. It feels like that's the whole of politics now, particularly in the days before these local elections, right? It's Project Fear, not just from one party against another, every party against every other party, including, by the way, Reform against the Greens, which to me indicates they kind of joined the uni party. We'll talk about that, I guess, in the weeks ahead. Let's see what Waitley said next in response to a fantastic question from Lewis Goodall.
Would you be happy with, say, Tommy Robinson's marches, which included Elon Musk calling for the overthrow of our government? You're happy for that to go ahead?
I don't believe that Tommy Robinson here is talking about wanting to get rid of Israel and eradicate the Jewish people.
But he has
that is a completely different thing.
But at multiple demonstrations, not just his, but including Britain First rallies, for example, we've seen crowds chanting things like "Allah is a paedophile," "Muslim bombers off our street," signs reading "Stop Islam," "Ban Islam," or framing Islam as inherently violent or incompatible with Britain. Lots of Muslims would see that and think, that threatens me. Should they be banned?
So I want a tolerant society, and I want people to be able to, freely protest and express their views. But what I don't want is a situation where we start tolerating events which are basically calling for the eradication of the
They're
Jewish
calling for
population.
Muslims to be left to be deported from Britain.
All right, yeah, but I don't want to see marches where Jewish people are basically under threat and it's seen as somehow acceptable. Calling for
and that's completely fine. I'm just wondering where the line is, because you're saying that that's a problem, and lots of people will agree with you. But there'll be lots of Muslims who think that those things I've just described are also a problem, make them feel unsafe. But you're saying that's fine.
I think so. If somebody's calling to death to all Muslims, I'd be against that too. treat those things equally. But that is not what I'm hearing. What I'm hearing is different things going on here. And as I said, what is very clearly wrong and what has gone wrong in this country is allowing marches which were essentially calling death to Jewish people.
But what you're saying,
Israel.
You're saying that not everyone. Not everyone clearly at those marches for Gaza and Palestine would be racist. Clearly, they wouldn't be. But you're saying that some of the people there are racist and are calling for violent, appalling things. So on the basis of that logic, you would ban Tommy Robinson's rally, because some of the people, not all the people there are racist and calling for appalling things, but some people are.
No, I've explained my position. It feels to me like we're going. Well, it feels like we're going round and round in circles. So I don't see the benefit in going on as to one thing versus
I'm just wondering
another.
what the consistency is. That's all.
It is consistent. I say, and
two calls for violence against two different groups.
No,
one's bad, one's okay.
Calling for a death to a group of people, that is not okay. That is not the right thing in our country.
Ban Islam. So ban Muslims, basically. How is that not really dangerous to a group of people when you're saying ban Islam?
I'm saying
ban Muslims from this country.
Calling for the death of a whole, of people, of the Jewish people, that is not something.
So ban Judaism would be okay.
So what we're saying, I think you're going into hypotheticals. What about this? What about that? We've seen what's happened. What we've seen happen.
He got you, Helen. It's not hypothetical. It happens. Absolutely correct. Nobody is at a Palestine demo on a platform saying, kill every Jewish person in the world, 15 million people. Nobody's saying that. If they were saying that, first of all, it's incitement, it's a criminal offense. We don't know about that case. If they were from overseas, they would not be allowed back in the country, as happened with a speaker who was at a Tommy Robinson protest. That's not happening. So if they're talking about things which aren't happening to stigmatize and demonize a group of people, you have to ask yourselves, why? Michael, you said before Heidi Alexander was kind of phoning it in. She didn't really believe in what she was saying.
She was worse.
She was worse.
She was much worse. I just like the first question. Like the first answer was really phoning it in, because he's asking a question about consistency. You're saying there are some racist people on this march, so the whole thing should be cancelled. And, I think that's massively overstated. But there are also some racist people on this march, so why shouldn't that be banned? Well, Tommy Robinson doesn't want to get rid of Israel. Is that... No, that's not the basis of the question. The basis of the question is that the only offensive thing that one can say is not about Israel. There are other issues in the world, right? She's like, oh no, why would we ban a march if it's not about Israel? I thought aren't we talking about Israel? We can talk about other things. There are other issues in the world than Israel, right? But it just doesn't compute for her. It is consistent.
Because I say so.
It's very similar to Heidi Alexander saying, like, we've dealt with this. She's like, it is consistent. It's like, fair play to Lewis Goodall, because he seemed like, he'd had his Weetabix, he'd had his coffee, he was kind of enjoying that. He has got these two centrist politicians who've sort of been given their lines, have no game whatsoever, just like, oh, shall we end it now? It's like he gets to decide when it ends, I thought it was fabulous.
I mean, no wonder the country's got problems. If this is the caliber of the political class, and they can't even talk about the problems that afflict this country. Now, you might be saying, we've done a whole show on this, because it's literally all the media's talked about for the last 4 days. And they're doing that, and the two major parties doing that, because we have local elections on Thursday. No wonder we have major problems. And by the way, inflation's about to go really high. The costs of British debt, higher since 1998. These are real stories that we could have talked about, we should talk about, we will talk about over the coming days. But the political class and the media don't want to talk about any of this stuff. Just like with Corbyn, right? 2015 to 2019, they didn't want to talk about policy. And all of a sudden, as soon as Corbyn lost, they're like, wow, Britain's in decline. Have you noticed? Local authorities aren't funded anymore. Nothing works. High streets look like crap. How did that happen? Why isn't anybody talking about this? The left tried to talk about it for the last decade, and you just wanted to talk about why Israel is wonderful. Heaven on earth.